Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Whoop, we are frozen here already. Wow. Why are we frozen already here? Not a good start to what's going on here. See if we can get that fixed real quick here. Anyways, good evening. Welcome to Communications and Cigars. I'm your host, John Crook. As we go ahead and there we go. Now we're working. Wow, technical difficulties at its finest here tonight. So, welcome to this week's episode of Communications and Cigars. Sorry, we had that little glitch here. Today is Monday. I don't even know what it is. It's Monday the 30th, right? Yeah, January 31st. Wow, it's kind of been, I don't know, kind of been flying by here for the first of the year tonight. And tonight's episode is Let's Hook Up. And we're going to be talking about power connections and some chargers and stuff like that on here. So we got a variety of different power connections that we're going to discuss here tonight. Now, one of the things that I wanted to do with this episode is because it really comes down to there's a lot of different power connectors that are out there. And some are going to suit others better than others, you know, in different aspects and different guards and stuff. But the biggest thing it's going to be is tonight is we're going to kind of cover some of the more common power connectors. Now, I will tell you this, I was not 100% aware of all the different power connectors that actually were out there until I got into something that I've been doing from before, and that was dealing with RC cars. Now, back in the day, when I started with RC cars, it dealt a lot with Molex connectors. So when you had Molex connectors, were really simple, the simple type of square plastic ones. One kind of had a rounded sort of U-ish looking shape. The other was more of a square, so you couldn't reverse polarity on them and whatever. But now that I'm getting back into RC cars, I'm finding out there is a ton of connectors. And ironically, with all the different types of connectors that are out there, there are really a lot based on what you like and what you want to use. And there's no standardization of power connectors. But we're going to talk a little bit about that this evening. So first of all, I want to go ahead and say thank you for everybody for tuning into the channel. I see some people are actually popping in here into the chat. So good evening, Kevin. Good evening, Andy, Evan, Anthony, Ben, Chuck, KB8YIT, Marvin. Good evening. Fourth and Birch, good evening. KK6USY, good evening, Chuck. Roger and T.O. and Jim sent you. Very good. They're going to owe you some royalties on there. Brian, AD8GI, Liberty Cave, and Wild Cascadian Radio. So want to also to bring up one more thing here. I will kind of touch about it a little bit at the end of the show on there. We got a few coming programming notes that are going to be coming up for the next couple weeks, and I'll go ahead and explain as to why those are coming up there. So with that being said, it's communications and cigars. So we can't have communications unless we go ahead and we talk about cigars. So one of the things I think that's probably a good discussion about cigars this night is I kind of talked about it before, but a good travel humidor. And the reason I bring that up is because I'm going to need a good traveling humidor because I will be attending Hamcation this year. So I'm getting all ready for Hamcation on there. So I'll be wearing a couple different hats, obviously, at Hamcation, one with the normal jobs and stuff that I go ahead and do. And then in addition to that, I'll be kind of around there and probably meeting some hams and on breaks and stuff like that, and probably having a good cigar or maybe two there. Or maybe we can't smoke at the fairgrounds, who knows, but maybe there'll be a meetup in some place afterwards or something like that on there. So with that being said, a good traveling humidor. So a lot of people said, hey, when you have a good humidor, what is the best type of humidor? What's a good one out there? Well, that's going to come down actually to personal preference. I know some people will actually just have a nice, good, tight-fitting cigar case that will work good for them. Usually that could last you a couple days. Otherwise, if you're going to an area like, once again, Florida, Hamcation, February in Florida, it's actually mid to upper 70s, it looks like what the long-range forecast is. So with that being said, guess what? I'm going to need a good humidor. I'm going to need one that's going to be great for, dealing with humidity, as well as keeping that temperature in there. And then interesting enough, I'm going to find out and I'll report back how easy is it to travel with a nice circular humidor that I have that kind of looks like a small incendiary device. So we'll see how that actually goes there. So let's get back to hooking up. That's right. I was thinking about doing some Barry White music or something like that on there, but I didn't. So I'm going to talk about the common, some of the, we're going to start with common connectors and move down to the common connectors. And don't get lost on it. We'll take it step by step and we'll talk about it. Like I said, I do have actual little examples. I went along and purchased, as a matter of fact, here, look at all the ones that I purchased. So we got a fair amount of connectors we're going to talk about here tonight on there. Alrighty. So before we start, we should really actually go ahead and talk about an important thing. Is if you want to go ahead and send an idea for the show, comment, suggestion, drop me in and say, hey, how are you? How's it going, John? That kind of thing. Or hey, maybe even better yet, you might be down in Hamcation and you want to go ahead and get together. Let's go ahead and drop me an email, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. Once again, communications-cigars@jjkcom.com. One thing I also do want to apologize for last week. I guess maybe it's a sign of stardom or something like that. We had a couple of actual bots that popped into the chat session last week. So I do apologize. If I do see one in there, I'm going to go ahead and try to do that. I do not want to have to turn on subscription commenting on there, so we might change a few things. We might even do a couple different things where we have an in-memory device there. So who knows what's going to happen. But if I do see any bots in the chat, I'll try to knock that out right away, and I do apologize on there. So first connector we're going to talk about is one that's common and I think loved by a fair amount in the amateur community, and that is going to be the good old Anderson power pole. Now, the Anderson power pole, and I know I might get flamed for saying this, but the Anderson power pole is an easy connector. Let's put it that way. It really has some benefits, but it also has some negatives on there. So with that being said, if you take a look at the connector, you have to crimp it on. Now, there's a big debate, and I guess I'm kind of getting into that debate a little bit on there, of with that Anderson power pole connector, taking a look at it, you have to crimp on the tabs, but can it just be crimp? Or I've actually put a small glob of solder on there. Just a tiny little glob of solder, and then that goes ahead and flows it. So when you put a little glob in there, I think it gives a little bit better. Now, I do have the Anderson power pole connector crimper on there. That is a thing on there. You can buy it as a kit. There's really no reason why you shouldn't buy a kit. It's really simple. I think a kit costs like, someone could probably correct me in the chat, but I think I got mine at Ham Radio Outlet or something like that for like $90 or something, or $99. And it came with a bunch of different size connectors and all that jazz like that. So it's really simple. But if you see the top, that's kind of the flat view as you look down. And then the bottom picture is kind of the side view. So you'll notice that there's already a metal tab inside on there. So you like slide it in and it kind of locks in that little clip over there. And from that point there, that's what kind of holds the connector in place. And then the connectors kind of slide into one another. Now, it's funny and interesting how they go, because with the plastic connectors, if you're looking at the black connector and you're looking at the red connector on the top part there, they actually kind of slide lock into one another. So Anderson power pole connectors actually do have multiple colors on there. So you don't have to just get red and black, because they can be used for a few other things that are on there. So there, I mean, it's a debate. It really is a debate. I see some people that will go ahead and saying, hey, I'm only using Anderson power poles. The rest of you can go pound sand. And I've heard other people that have said, Anderson power poles are not that great. I had someone make a bad connection on mine once, and I started to smell smoke while I was driving, and I felt it, and it was hotter than sin. And I was just like, we're done with it. We're done with it completely. And from that point, I said, nope, we're not going to do it. No. And I said, well, I'm going to give it a second chance, get the crimper, crimp myself, and then put that little flow solder on there. And then voila, it seemed to go ahead and work a little bit better. And I apologize if you hear a little tinging in the background. That's me getting my next connector ready. So with that, they're nice. They're easy on there. They're readily available, and they're kind of cheap. Cheap as in cost, and I don't know. I don't want to say cheap as in cheap, but they're inexpensive. Let's put it that way. So that is the first one. That is the Anderson Power Pole Connector. All right, next thing we're going to go ahead and do is, go back to this one here. The next one we're going to talk about is the Traxxas Connector. Now, I didn't show an Anderson Power Pole Connector because guess what? If you don't know what an Anderson Power Pole Connector is, get to a hobby store, get to a get somewhere. You can find Anderson Power Poles everywhere. It's kind of like, buying a VCR in the 80s and getting a copy of Ghost, okay? and I laugh at that because for a while there, if you were in the 90s, you bought a VCR around the time Ghost came out for Christmas, it came with the copy of Ghost. Anyways, but I see a lot of people in the comments on the Anderson Power Poles. Yeah, a lot of people crimp and solder. So the next one I bring up is the Traxxas Connector. Now, this is a connector that's made by a RC car company called Traxxas, and they have actually two out there. They actually have the one on the top, which is what they call the basic Traxxas Connector, and then they have the one on the bottom, which is actually called the more of the weatherproof one or the high power balanced one on there. So reason we're talking about this is there because if you look at the bottom of that Traxxas, it says LiPo. So we're talking lithium polymer batteries here. And I'll tell you what, you want a great inexpensive battery that's gonna run your handheld for a while, or even your mobile radio or a scanner or something on there. You can go and get like lithium polymer batteries up in 12, the 13, the 14 volt range. And you can get like seriously like 6,000 milliamp hour battery packs and everything like that there. So it's once again, it's personal preference on, how you want to use these or what you want to do with them and everything. These come with the Traxxas RC car kits, but when I started to look at it and did a little research on them, the top one, which I'm going to show and talk about here, is more of the common one that tends to be out and about in there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take and we're going to go over to our camera here, and I'm going to pick this up because the camera has a hard time focusing on it. So let's see if we can do that there. Let's see if I can put my hand behind it there. There we go. So you see that is the tab that actually right here is where you're going to go ahead and solder on your wires to it. Now, the weird part about it is that there is no sort of, and I'm trying to get my hand to, let me get over here a little bit more. Trying to get my hand in there so it kind of focuses on the connector, but there's really nothing in there to solder to. So I really didn't like that. Now, some people have said you could take like little lugs, there are special lugs that they can do, but in all reality, what you're doing is, once again, I'm taking my things here. So what you're doing is basically you're going to be putting the tab, right in there. Let me kind of turn it there. You're going to be putting the tabs right in here. So you're going to slide it in from the back side here. The tabs are going to go right in there. And then what's going to happen is they'll go out the front part here. Now I'm going to actually do that just to kind of show you what it looks like, because I don't use Traxxas connectors. I actually use, and I'm moving to Xt60 connectors, which I'll talk about in a moment. And I know I have an Xt60 fan in here too. So we're going to go and show you. So it just is going to slide right into the back there. And then you just kind of give it a good push in there. And I'll actually have to do it with my hands here. But you're going to give a good push in there. And then once you give it a good push into there, you'll start to see it's kind of coming out the tip there. And you just got to push and kind of push and push and push and push. And then it's going to go right on in there. So I'm not really having a good job on there because my hands are sore, as you can kind of see and everything. But once that connector's in there for you, all you're simply going to do then is you're going to take this front part here, and you see how they have the little ridges. Whoops, sorry, your little ridges right there and there. And you're just going to go ahead and slide them right in there, and it locks into place just like that. That simple, that easy. Pull it apart and then slide it in just like that. Now, one of the things that I'll go ahead and show you on here, and I'll need my trusty pointers here, is they tell you which one. See if I can get it on there. See if you can see it again there. Which one is the positive, negative? See, there's the positive sign and there is the negative sign. So it tells you which side you need to hook those wires into, because that's what I see a lot on there. Is it's like, oh man, you know, here's the deal. You know, what side goes positive, what side goes negative. In addition, it also talks about the standards. See, this is considered a male plug. This is considered the female plug. But then once again, even on the female side, kind of put it there, you can kind of see on the little mounds there, you see a little plus or minus. There you go. It tells you what side to hook the wire to. So that's, I think that's kind of a reassuring spot on there to be able to go and saying, hey, here's the deal. Here is the Traxxas Connector. Alrighty, next one we're going to talk about. I know this is someone's favorite on here. This is going to be called, or is called, the Xt60 Connector. Xt60 Connector. Now, it's called an Xt60 Connector because there's also an Xt30 and an Xt90. And does anybody want to guess why they call it an Xt30 or an Xt60 or an Xt90? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Alrighty, it's because of amperage. So the Xt60, guess what, can handle 60 amps. Alrighty, the Xt30 can handle 30 amps, and the Xt90 can handle 90 amps. Now, the amperage is totally 100% related to the size of the connector. Just like, I will go ahead and say, like the Anderson power poles, they do make different ones on there. So let's get back to our screen here, and let's take a look here. So here is the Xt60 connector. Now, the reason I chose the Xt60 over the 90 or the 30 is because that is what is most commonly being used on batteries in the RC world today for some of them, okay? These are all connectors that are across there, but I like to use these. And the reason I like to use these is for a couple of purposes. One, I like that like enclosed housing. So if you actually take a look at this, so you have the housing there, they fit snugly into one another, and you can almost hear it. I'll even kind of, here you can, whoop, if I can do it with both hands here. Do you hear that? Like, I mean, it like, here, we'll even do it on the front of the microphone. That's the connector. That little pop there just goes ahead, and I just truly, truly like it. Now, yes, the prongs are I've had, and I looked at this connector. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute here. The soldering prongs are there. So yes, this little cheap package I bought comes with little tubing that I can go and slide right over there, heat shrink tubing, and then put the over the cable and stuff. Or I'll show you this too. It's on actually the other connector, but they do make these little, I'll show it to you on the other connector, but these actually do fit on there also. So it has a little kind of, for sake of a better term, a little kind of, I don't know, like protective housing on there. But they're hard, they're snug fit on there. They do have, so you can't, I mean, obviously you have the little bridge here, and then you have the little bridge right there. But also too, it does have a little safety notch in there also, if I can kind of get that into the camera picture there. And then it has that little safety notch there, and it plugs together really, really nice. Now, I do believe, and Chuck, I see you in here. I think Chuck's still in here. I think some solar arrays use these, and I want to say, and if there's any marine people in there, I think they're also use these a lot in marine applications. But this, I'll be honest with you, I love this connector more than I love the, what am I trying to say? The Anderson power poles. I don't know why. I just really, really like these connectors. They're really, really small, compact. I mean, look at the size of my hand, but it's got a great, here's the nice part about it. For those that solder, I'm going to just do this here real quick to kind of show you. Look at how deep that goes in there. So I'm going to, I know this is a bad example of it, but like that's how deep the wire can fit in there. I mean, you take a look at it. Like if I put it right up to there, that's how deep the wire goes in there. It's there. So you know that it's really, 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 really deep. Really, I really like it. And I apologize that I did not moisturize. I'm just going to tell people that right now. But here's a cool thing about the Xt60 connectors also too on there. Hey, which one? A lot of people say, okay, which one goes on which? So obviously this is the female connector because it has the whole inserts, and then this is actually going to be your male connector on there. The female connector tends to go towards the battery side on there, but hey, which side is positive and negative? Once again, I'm going to show you right here. See if we can get up to the camera right nice and close there. Hopefully we'll adjust it. That's what I was also trying to use the instance here. Let's put my hand there, see if I can. There you go. See that plus sign right there? Tells you, hey, this side is plus. We're going to flip it over here. Kind of do my hand as like the background fader. Come on, focus. There's a negative symbol on there too, if we can get it to focus right. Anyways, there's a negative sign right on there too. Sorry, the camera doesn't like to focus on there tonight, but there is a little negative sign right there that goes ahead and tells you and says, hey, so you know which side to put negative and you know which side to put positive on there. And then that way, same thing on the other side here. You have the negative little symbol on there. See if I can, there we go. See the little negative symbol on there? Now I'm going to flip it over. See a little positive symbol on there? Once again, you know, so if these two are not connected and you don't have the cables there, hey, which side is negative? Well, guess what? This side is negative, or if you just want to remember, the flat side is positive on there. So that is the Xt60 as part as well as the Xt90 and Xt30. Once again, the difference, amperage on there. Alrighty, so those are that. Now the next connector is sort of I kind of call it like the illegitimate brother and sister of the Xt60, which is called the IC3. Now the IC3 is very similar, as you can kind of see, to the Xt60 connector, but the biggest difference is going to be is that it has a high power pin or a sensor pin on there. And I'll show you here in a minute. But once again, the big difference you'll see is that in the center of the connector on here, on the female side, you actually have a tiny little pin between the two connectors. And on the male side, you actually have a tiny little female slot in the center. So let me get this all set up on my screen here. And we'll click it back over. So here we go. We have it set up here where now we have, you see on there, let me kind of put my hand back behind it a little bit. Now you see this is the female side, but see that center pin on there? You can actually put it, and that's sometimes people will use that for a balance charge on there. If you see, you got to connect that tiny little sensor wire right there into it. So yeah, so you have your connections on each side, a positive and a negative, and then you have that center wire there. And that, once again, that center wire can be high voltage, a balance, a sensory cable on there. This is actually used on a controller. These were made by a controller company. They actually make RC car controllers. And I believe that the reason that they did this is because then you can put a sensor backfeed from the battery on there. So you slide these two together, they got a nice tight fit on there. And then once again, you got your positive and your negative, and then you have your little sensor wire on there. Now, the nice part about this here, as I kind of told you, is look at that cap. That cap is really nice because now what do? You can run your cables through it before you solder on. You got your positive, you got your negative, and then you got your little sensor wire that comes out of there. So now what ends up happening is that you can put this little cap right on there, and now you have a whole wire. I'm not going to snap it on there because once they're snapped on, they're hard to snap off. But now you have that whole sensor plug right on there. Let me pull that apart there. Wow, Jesus. Here, I snapped it on there. But now you would have that whole sensor plug right there. Your wires are coming into there. It's got it. No worry about shrink wrap tubing or anything. And then you have your positive, your negative in there. Now, once again, just like the Xt60 connector, you can notice on there is the positive. Can kind of get it to focus once again here. There's the positive on there symbol, and then if you flip it over, there is the negative symbol right there. So negative, so hey, like which side do I do positive? Well, that's negative, and that's positive on there. But if you notice something, the square bottom, just like the Xt60, is positive also. So that is your IC3 connector. So there you go. Oh, there you go. So you can now see this in focus a little bit more. There you go. There's your positive. Flip it around real quick. And there is your negative. So nice, easy to do it there. And then they kind of, it almost sounds like you're breaking it, but you're just snapping it out on there. So that is your IC3 connector on there. All right, let's go on over. And now the next one we're going to talk about is the EC3. Yes, EC3, because we need to continue to use all but one letter of the alphabet. And now when we use the EC3, now we're getting into sort of like this weird kind of hybrid. And this weird kind of sort of hybrid, and I call it a hybrid just because it's utilizing bullet connectors and a plastic housing on there. So bullet connectors in sort of the plastic housing setup. Now that is kind of a unique and interesting thing, because you would be like, well, wait a minute, what's the speciality of this? Well, you can kind of have a little plastic. It's small, it's compact. It kind of keeps things a little bit nicer and cleaner and a little bit more together. But now as we go and take a look at them in real life, we see here the two main key important parts on here. So the first part is going to be the bullet connector. Now the bullet connector, I was going to go, I'll pull it up here. Standard bullet type connector on there. It's just going to go ahead and slide right into one another on there. Sorry, the background is kind of blurring everybody out, but I mean, a bullet connector is a bullet connector. See if I can get that in a little bit of a better picture there. So there it is. There's the bullet connector on there. It's connected together. Let me go ahead and put the pieces down in my hand. Hopefully they'll give us a little bit of a better view on there. But there you go. There's the male end and there is the female end on there. You basically stick your wire right in the end of it, and then you're going to drop some solder in there or tin your wire or however you need to go ahead and do it. And then same thing with that one there. You're going to go ahead and get solder in there, tin your wire however you need to do it there. And then once you're done with that, you're going to slide them actually into the connector here. Now, one thing you'll notice on here is two things. One, there's going to be a battery side. So if you're wondering which side is battery, and I'm going to hope you can see it there. There's wording. See the word battery right in between there? Actually, let me move it around here so you can see it the proper way. If you see, it says the word battery between the two plugs right there. So this is going to go on your battery side of things on there. And then you're wondering like, hey, well, what side's positive and what side is negative? That's really good because that question gets asked a lot, so you're hooking it up correctly. But you see right on the front plugs of it. Once again, let me flip it over my hand. Hand's having a little bit better part there. And if you could see right there, that is the positive and that is the negative side. And it's right on positive and negative right on there. I wish my camera would adjust a little bit better. But anyways, that is the sides that you have on there for doing that. So it tells you what is the positive and what is the negative side on there. Now, there is debate about which ones do you put into where, because this is obviously going to connect the right together. You know, the square is square and the circle is circle, kind of like the thing we had as kids, right? So the people said, well, what do? Do you put the bullets and then the receivers on the other end, or how do you do it? There's a couple of schools of debate on there. And to be honest with you, I see some people say it should be this way. I see other people should be it this way. I see people saying, well, what does your battery have on there already? You know, are you making this all in there, or are you adding, like, let's say the battery connector onto there and already has the source connection on there? I don't know. It's all across the board. The simplest thing to do is just remember that if you're going ahead and doing this type of connector, that you make sure you do it consistently. So like some people will tend to put the females, because that's what usually goes in there, they'll put the female bullet connectors on the battery side here, and then they'll take and put on the, flip it over here. If you see, there is the dev side. It says dev really tiny deep in there. You can almost see it right by my fingertip there. It says DEV, that stands for device. And then what they'll do is, just like the other connectors, they'll go ahead and they'll put that on. Whoop. See, I can't get it. These things are too small. And then they'll put that on that side there. And then when they connect together, they'll go like that. Once again, a couple different schools of thought, but yet another connector to add to the arsenal. Alrighty, now we're going to talk about the Hxt connector, and this connector I'm talking about tonight is the 4mm size. Now, the reason I say 4mm is because there are other connectors out there that are larger. So there are HXT, I believe, in the 5 and I believe in the 3mm size. So they are kind of a simplistic kind of connector, which is a hybrid of, let's say, a barrel connector and a very long shafted, almost sort of like an EC3 connector. However, one of the interesting things about it is, if you notice, is on each side of the connector, one is going to have a small tube, one is going to have a large tube, and obviously that's going to go to the other connector that way. Now, this is another one I've seen. I actually have seen this sometimes in RVs, believe it or not, on there. And it's a great idea for a connector, but I can easily see myself screwing it up. The biggest thing I want you to take note is, note how the one side is going to have the smaller tube being always the male connector, and the larger tube always being the female connector. Now, the problem is that it could easily reverse polarity, alrighty? Because if you make one and you're like, oh, okay, well, if you don't hook it up correctly, then what can happen is on the other end, you could actually put them into the wrong thing together. So I'm not a big fan of this connector, but I'm not here to give you my personal opinion, really. I shouldn't do that. I just to point it out to you. So let's take a look here at this connector. So right away, like I said, you're going to see it's a 2-pin connector here, or 2-tube connector, I should say. Let me put this together. And once again, the tube just slides out. There's not even any really locking thing in there. They just slide and it kind of sits on there. I mean, I could probably, yeah, see, I could easily slide it out. Now, the bullet connectors below it are supposed to go ahead and hold it in there. But I don't know, it's really problematic, because if you have this side as the small side, and what happens if you accidentally say, okay, wait a minute, I'm making a bunch of these connectors and they're side by side, so I'm going to go ahead and make the male side on this one here the positive, and the female side is going to be the negative. Well, if you're not thinking correctly and being like, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to hook these two together like this. See, I can't even get them in there. Like that. Then what you're going to do is like, oh, okay, I'm making these. Well, small is positive, large is negative. Okay, small is positive, large is negative. Now look what happens. You slide it in there. You're going to be hooking the positive of this side to the negative of this side, and vice versa. So I really don't like it too much on there. However, the internal connector components are relatively simple. They are just simple bullet connectors, and like any regular bullet connectors are going to be, you're just going to slide the two into one of there, and then whoop, you're going to slide the two of them into there, and that's what gives that little locking, because you see how that's a little wider mesh on there, kind of like, then you squeeze it on there, and then those two are good connector strong in there. I'm going to take and put my hemostats in there. I'm going to try to pull, and there you go. It's hard to kind of pull them apart, but they're there. Now, I will say this. These 4mm connectors are really nice because they have an actual, if you notice, a little solder window on there. And I'll kind of point that out there. So a little solder window right there. So really what you can do is you can tin your tip of the wire, put it in there, heat it up. That tinning will be there, and you could drop another little gob or dab of solder right on there, and then load up the connectors here. Once again, like I said, you can put it here. Oh, okay, hey, here we go. I'm going to put the positive on the male side, but once again, if you put the positive here, then you just shorted everything out. That's, once again, that's an opinion. It's an opinion. Alrighty, so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Dean's connector. Now, the Dean's connector is a unique connector, in my opinion, because it's sort of like the T connector. So I didn't bring up the T-style Molex connector. That's what's common on a lot of your current radios that are out there, whether it's, usually amateur-based radios. And even some of the Chinese-type radios and stuff that are out there, they really tend to go ahead and have this T connector thing down to, just this whole kind of, hey, this is the flavor. And I'll tell you what, it's a nice little connector. It's a small little connector. Now, I got some of the smaller ones here. I'll show you in a minute here. But they do make bigger ones. And but it's just, once again, it's what you see. It is literally a T on there, so it's not really anything fancy or schmancy about it. One's going to be a male, one's going to be a female on there, obviously, to have the locking mechanisms on there. And voila, that is basically it for the Dean's connector. Now, I'm not sure why they call it the Dean's connector, but as you can see, the side I'm going to be holding it on with my little crimpers. This is the female side, obviously, because it receives it in there, but it has little tabs where you're going to go ahead and solder your wire onto there. And then this side is obviously the male connector, and has little soldering tabs on there. And all you're simply going to do is it only goes one way. So when it goes top to bottom, then you're going to take it and slide it in there, and then they're going to go ahead and fit nice and tight in there. And they're really kind of hard. I mean, I imagine if you had wire, you could pull wire on there, but they're kind of hard to pull it off. But if you noticed, their locking is related to this little bump right here, and then that little bump right there. That adds someone kind of almost like a jam fit, for sake of a better term. So we're going to go ahead and slide it right in there, and then voila, it is connected together. Now, this one doesn't have any backing with it, but like the kit here comes with, you know, shrink wrap on there. So you can slide the shrink wrap on there and then solder the connection onto there. You know, just these flat tab soldering, it's just kind of like some little bit difficult. I don't really know anything that uses a Dean's connector. So I don't know. If anybody does know it in there, put it in the chat. I'm not really sure of anything that really uses the Dean's connector on there. So, yeah. Alrighty. Well, now we come to the part of the show which, you know, really bends my antenna. And tonight's subject is talking about connectors. And what really bends my antenna about connectors is, for the most part, everybody that has that kind of aspect of, you have to use this connector because this is the only connector. I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly. And the reason I disagree wholeheartedly on that is because it's going to be a personal preference. It really is going to be a personal preference. Anderson power poles. Why are Anderson power poles popular? It was because we've popularized them as from the aspect of the amateur radio community. Alrighty. One of the plugs I didn't show you tonight was one that's common sort of with some of the Motorola radios on there, which is a very kind of a modified, kind of like it has a shielded end, and it has an unshielded end, and da-da-da-da-da. But, you know, Motorola has standardized on that type of plug. Kenwood has a different type of plug. E.F. Johnson has a different type of plug. And really, is one plug better than the other? No, it really isn't. There might be feature sets, or there might be things on there that one plug might do better than the other. Or, as I said tonight in my case, the Xt60 plug is more intriguing to me. Well, why is it intriguing to me? Well, one, because I bought batteries for my RC car that happens to have the Xt60 connector. I like the form, I like the fit, I like the feel. I don't need to have an additional locking tab to know that it is in place. But once again, that is, just me in there. Others are going to like Anderson power poles. And as I said, I even have in my shack here radios that are, and radios that have Anderson power pole cables on them. And my power strip that pulls off my high-end power supply is, guess what? A power strip that consists of Anderson power poles. Does that mean Anderson power poles is one? No, it really doesn't in any way, shape, or form. The biggest thing I think that people need to understand is that having different power poles is the equivalent, or I shouldn't even say power poles, power connectors, is sort of the equivalent of having different style of shoes. There are many different styles of shoes out there. Sneakers, dress shoes, casual shoes, all those things like that. And guess what? Power connectors fit into that same category. But does that mean that one type of shoe can only fit on one type of person? No, it does not. There are numerous different types of connectors that are out there. Pulling from my CommT and CommL training that I had, I've learned one thing. Standardization is going to be a bastardized child of an emergency response. Now, I apologize about the language, but that statement meant a lot to me, because it says if we fall into the trap of standardization, that goes ahead and means that the time that an unstandardized thing comes to the market, that is going to be quite difficult. So what can we do to bridge this gap? What can we do to put a sneaker on a person who is wearing a cowboy boot? Well, guess what? we can make adapters. And there is a lot of adapters that exist out there. If you take some of the names of the connectors that are on here tonight and say, hey, I want to be able to cross, a Dean's connector to an Xt60 connector, guess what? You're going to be able to find a Dean's male connector to a Xt60 female connector, or vice versa, or however it needs to go. There's going to be numerous connectors out there. And guess what? If you have a soldering gun and you have a wire stripper and you have some 12 to 14 gauge wiring around and nothing to do, you can go ahead and make your own adapter. Don't fall into the trap that my connector is better than your connector, because otherwise we're going to have a lot of issues when it comes time to be able to say, hey, I want to try a new power supply or a power strip. And that's what this week's Bends My Antenna is all about. So thank you to everyone that tuned into the show this week. I hope it was a really good one for you. If you do, once again, let me pull up the email there. If you do have any comments, suggestions, anything you want to talk about the show, go ahead and let me know. I did say I was going to talk about a programming note at the end. We are going to be looking at maybe doing a recorded show next week on there. And the reason being is that I will be packing for Hamcation. So I will be unable to kind of trying to pack and then get up early to catch a flight and everything like that. That might go ahead and kind of cover a few things. So if we do have a show next week, it is going to be a recorded show on there if we do. So I do apologize about that. And then, of course, the Monday right afterwards of Hamcation weekend, we'll see if we're going to have a show. That might be one of those weeks that, you know what, I think I just might take a week off on there. So I appreciate everybody that did tune in tonight. I hope this was educational for you. Once again, not trying to sway you into any one connector. Don't take my opinion, because like Dirty Harry said, opinions are like a-holes. Everybody's got one, and they usually stink. So until then, I hope I could see you at Hamcation. If not, we'll talk to you online. 73, and if you enjoy your cigar, sit back, relax, and enjoy it, and stay safe.